I really, look at it as a celebration of my record collection for one, my love of queer sex and connection two, and a sort of analysis or look at what it was like for me growing up just under the shadow of the HIV/AIDS crisis.
Today on Rainbow Country, The Vinyl Diaries. Author Pete Crichton joins me to talk about his memoir, The Vinyl Diaries: Sex, Deep Cuts, and My Soundtrack to Queer Joy. A poignant and funny memoir about sexual awakening, music, and discovering one's true self. We'll find out about Pete's journey to writing his memoir, and so much more.
Hi, I'm Jeannie Becker, and this is Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
Prelude. It was a beautiful March day, the first of its kind when you think winter is almost over, and I was in the window seat of one of my favorite queer bars, Lipstick and Dynamite, rest in peace, on Toronto's Queen Street West, with a handful of close friends, a sextet of gay men ranging from their 30s into their 60s. The sun shone through the window and refracted through the many pints of beer littered around the table. A literal gay rainbow spread across the detritus of our drinking. My boyfriend Christopher and I were still in the flush of a relationship newly started. We had only been dating 5 or 6 months by then, and were still figuring out how we fit into each other's lives. He was very physically demonstrative in front of his friends, constantly touching my arm, rubbing my back, placing his hand on my inner thigh, and holding my hand. I felt so comforted by his love, by his attentions. I wasn't used to this kind of affection, especially in public. We drank, we laughed, we listened to music, but the mood was heavy. It was March 15th, 2020, and we all knew we likely shouldn't be gathered together. COVID-19 was a virus we'd been hearing about with increasing frequency. There were rumors floating around that a lockdown of schools, workplaces, and non-essential retail would be announced the following day. While not much was known about the virus, what was being communicated through the media was that COVID-19 was wildly contagious and potentially deadly. It was all happening so fast, and my friends and I were making the most of our last taste of freedom. That afternoon, I was putting on a brave face. We all were, I think. We weren't ready to accept the possibility of a plague, but we also knew that one was creeping ever closer to us. There we were, sun-dappled, beer-buzzed, and facing an uncertain future together. We talked about stocking up on booze and edibles, let the straight folks fight it out for toilet paper and canned vegetables. We gays had our priorities. It seemed as if we were heading on a short adventure, separate and apart. The speculation in the media was that the lockdown would only last for a couple of weeks. We'd all work from home for a short time, and then life would go back to normal. Easy peasy. Turns out we were wrong. Very, very, very wrong. A group of gay men of different generations sitting around a bar and debating a pandemic. There was something eerily familiar about that scene. Little did I know, I was facing the second plague of my lifetime. This time, hiding was not an option.
Pete Crichton, hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm great, Mark, thank you. How about you?
I am well, I am well. Thank you for being here, to have your voice, your story be heard by the LGBT community and beyond. So thank you for this, especially to talk about you. You, and you. You have your memoir that's out. It's called The Vinyl Diaries: Sex, Deep Cuts, and the Soundtrack to Queer Joy. My Soundtrack to Queer Joy. That's the full title.
It is a
The
full title.
the
Packs a lot of punch.
So let's start from the ground and build up. Talk to me about the message that's at the heart of of your story. What are within the pages of the Vinyl Diaries?
Oh golly, it's there is a lot in the 336 pages I think the book entails. I really, look at it as a celebration of my record collection for one, my love of queer sex and connection two, and a sort of analysis or look at what it was like for me growing up just under the shadow of the HIV/AIDS crisis. Because I was born in 1969, sort of too young to be sexually active when it was really at its peak, and sort of what that did to me as development as a gay person and a sexual person. Um, Spoiler alert, not great. Um, so yeah, it sort of touches on all those things. My love of music. We talk a lot about the artists that affected me and a little bit about their histories. We talk about many of the men I met, some casual connections, some longer term relationships, and really dig into those connections and what each of those men taught me, and really just look at my life and how I developed as a queer person over, the time period of the book is when I'm about 45 to 50.
So you just mentioned you essentially came of age in the 80s in the shadow of HIV and AIDS.
Hmm.
You also write about hiding your sexuality and finding comfort in music. So talk to me about what it is about music that drew you to it, that gave you comfort, as opposed to say like in books or in movies.
Sure.
Why music? Why do you think you were drawn to music in particular?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. My mom will tell you very early, very, very early, I just would hear music and I would dance and I would be alive in a way that I wasn't in the normal world. And that I think is still true for me today. It's a bit of an escape from a different world or escape to a different world. Um, and it's like a religious experience, for lack of a better sort of analogy. And why I think it was really my escape during the HIV/AIDS crisis is it really was a world I could control. And I went from being like a lover of music and dancing in my little room by myself into really purchasing a lot of records. I spent a ton of time on Yonge Street as a teenager buying records from long gone record stores. And my
Like,
Oh, like Sam's and A&A, the most obvious, but
okay.
do you remember Cheapies? I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was like the place for the UK imports and the 12-inch
Mm-hmm.
singles for like Tears for Fears and The Cure and Depeche Mode that I have lots of. That was a favorite spot for sure. And then there was
Did
a
you ever go
huge
to the vinyl? Was it called the Vinyl Museum?
the vinyl museum, definitely. He stamped those strange, like, there were some like psalms or religious messages in some of them stamped in ink, which kind of creeped me out. But they're still there. And there was a store called Vortex. I don't know if you remember Vortex. It was on Dundas, fairly close to Church and or Jarvis. I can't remember exactly where it was, but it was all used records, and you could buy like the most amazing stuff for $3. Um, so I did. I bought a lot of that stuff. But at home, just by myself, I could, alphabetize it and listen to it and read the liner notes. And it just was like a world so far away from the bedroom in my parents' basement. It just was absolute transformative for me.
So in your memoir, you link you link your partners, your lovers, your one night stands to music artists and songs, artists like the B-52s. You've got Prince, the Smiths. When I say Kate Bush, the Hounds of Love,
Yeah.
who or what comes to mind?
Oh man, I can't identify just one person or one man to that song or that album in particular. It's been so important to me since I first heard it in 1985. I listened to it today. Like it's a record that touches on so many relationships in my life, but I guess most importantly, just mine and my relationship to Kate Bush, who I love dearly.
Would you say that you were a hound for love as opposed to like a
Mhm.
hound for sex?
Oh yeah, in definitely when I was first dipping my toe into gay sex and connection, I, you know, it was an irrational fear, absolutely, but I was so terrified of HIV and AIDS. I was certain that just having sex, I would get it and that I would die. and much of the messaging made that seem so real for a lot of my peers and myself. So the idea of like really exploring my sexual identity when I was in my teens and early 20s and even into my 30s was just so terrifying. So I was a hound for love for sure, and a hound for like finding a partner that would be monogamous, that would play heteronormative roles and sort of create this marriage dynamic in a way that made sense to me at the time, which I then found really stifling in the end. But
The idea to link your partners to music and musical artists, what's the genesis of that particular idea, and where does that come from?
I think, it was definitely a eureka moment writing this book. It really cracked open how I would approach talking about some of these relationships and some of my sexual adventures and partnerships. Um, but I think we all do it, don't we? Like, don't you have, either from your early loves or at college, or you stayed up late and listened to this record, and that record just brings those emotions back to you in a way that,
And those people and those experiences.
yeah.
Hmm.
And like, I think that happened, like, to me, it becomes alive. Like, I see the colors, I see what I was wearing, I see the wallpaper. Like, for me, it's very uh, clear. And I think maybe other people aren't quite so specific, but I think those emotions that we feel come right back up, and a song and a record can do that and just bring us back to a time and a place and a relationship that both good times and bad times.
Hmm. In your memoir, you write about your relationships. You had two long-term monogamous relationships, and then by your 40s, you find yourself single, uh,
Mhm.
being out in the world dating again, dating apps, all that sort of stuff.
Mhm.
Do you think that gay men and being in relationships, same sex relationships between two men, do you think that men have to navigate relationships differently than other people, like two women or a man and a woman? Because it's two men, do you think that and monogamy and maybe negotiations around monogamy or the lack of monogamy, do you think that two men have to navigate relationships differently than others?
It's a great question. My first gut instinct is yes, absolutely. And I'm trying to think of why that was such an initial gut reaction.
Because maybe
Um,
men are more sexual.
oh, I don't think that's true. I think
Mm.
men define themselves by sex in a way that maybe women don't. Um, you know, I don't think this is true for me, but I think sometimes a lot of it is based around ego, um, proving to oneself that they can do it, and I don't think those things are true for women at all. Men get caught up in the conquest, I think, and
Mm.
puffing out their chest, and
And other
I don't
things.
know. Yeah, yeah, well, yeah. Yeah, I think I'm losing my train of thought a little bit, but I think definitely men having sex with men and men having relationships with men approach it very differently than other partnerships.
Mm. The title,
Mhm.
the vinyl diaries, sex, deep cuts, and my soundtrack to queer love. Is there a story
Queer
behind this?
joy, queer joy.
Queer joy, queer joy. Is there is there a story behind this particular title?
Uh, Honestly, I have my editor to thank for the Vinyl Diaries. I was really struggling with the title. Um, and as soon as he said it, it just was like, of course, that's what it's called. And like in my mind, I was playing with vinyl as a concept and sort of like the duality of like vinyl for sex play and vinyl for records, and sort of how to tie that into a title, but I just couldn't crack it. And so Scott, my editor, just emailed me one day. He's like, "What do you think of this? The Vinyl Diaries, sex, deep cuts, and something something." I can't remember what he had suggested, and I was like, "Yes, yes, yes, yes." And then I was like, no, it's a queer joy. Like for me, the book is so joyful that I really wanted that right in the title.
So, Pete Crichton, you were a marketing executive. You've studied comedy at Second City. You're now
Mhm.
an author. So here is the question: the Dolly Parton Choir.
Yeah.
What is the Dolly Parton Choir?
Mark, how do you not know?
I don't know. I mean, I
Well,
obviously know who Dolly Parton is, but there's a choir around Dolly Parton,
there is, based in
and where
Toronto.
is really?
Yeah, there's an event that I write a couple times about in the book called Steers and Queers, The Night of 1,000 Dollies, which is the brainchild of my now friend, Lauren Horty. And yeah, it's a night devoted, it's really campy, it's country and Western themed. There's a ton of different performances. And every year, I think since day one, there has been a choir that sings a cappella to a backing track to several Dolly Parton songs every Pride. So I joined maybe, oh my gosh, 6 or 7 years ago now. And yeah, it's as you would expect, silly, but super fun. We take it seriously. I can't sing with a hoot, so um, I hope I just my voice gets lost in the beautiful chorus of people celebrating Dolly Parton.
So you're part of the Dolly Parton choir. You were saying when you were younger, you'd be dancing around to music and all that sort of stuff.
Hmm.
Did when you were younger, did you want to be a performer? Did you want to be in the performing arts at all?
Oh man, I watched Fame, both the
Mm,
TV series and the film, and
mm-hmm,
like that was my dream was to go to
mm.
that New York Performing Arts School and like fling myself around and dance on the roof of cars. Um, Very much a fantasy of mine. But then the reality of actually being on stage and doing the work and being in the spotlight was something that really made me uncomfortable. Um, which I think is why I'm a writer today. I can sort of hide behind my computer and just type away and yeah, not be in the spotlight.
In your memoir, The Vinyl Diaries, you write about uh, your time in school when you were bullied,
Hmm.
being called names. Why do you think you were picked on?
I guess it was so easy. Like I was this really small kid for a really long time. Um, I liked playing jumpsies with the girls. I liked playing games with them because I didn't like sort of the aggro behavior of boys even at a young age. That's that whole sports thing and it just I didn't fit into that stuff. And so I think those behaviors, for better or for worse, still are identified as being gay or less than. So it became, and it didn't help that I did gymnastics for a while. So that also was a clear marker for my classmates anyway, that I was a young gay boy. And they told me all about it in not kind terms.
Mm. So you think you were picked on because you were gay?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Yeah.
So did you know that about yourself then? Maybe not necessarily the words, but
I did, yeah, like the words were thrown at me, and I didn't understand what they meant particularly. But I knew I was different. I knew I didn't belong in the world that I was living in. It's a pretty alienating feeling, which so many of us queer people have when we're growing up. Is like you look around, it's like, where do I fit in here? This isn't for me.
and any thoughts about those that time growing up and being bullied in school? Do you think that those formative years influenced or made you who you are today? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh golly.
Like had you not been bullied, had you not gone through those experiences, do you think you would be a different person than you are today? I mean,
Hmm.
who knows, right?
Who knows? It's a really interesting question.
Because are we shaped by the experiences of our past? And I would think
Yeah,
yes,
I would
we are.
agree. I would agree. And I think, I can be pretty defiant and I can be pretty stubborn. And I think those things are direct results of that experience. For a long time, it was definitely, I just buried my head in the sand and I didn't want to address that. But I think, when you finally come out of the closet, you get a little bit of confidence. And for
Mhm.
me, that took a couple decades. It didn't happen overnight. Um,
And how would you hide who you were sexually?
just not doing it, I think,
Mm.
really.
Hmm.
I think,
But did you have like girlfriends or friends that were female that you said like, "Hey, this is my girlfriend," when she wasn't
no, I didn't do
necessarily?
that. I never played that
Mm.
game. In high
Hmm.
school, I had a grade 9 girlfriend and a grade 10 girlfriend, and those were pretty, well, they were very innocent. But um, after that was, very much, I was just sort of the class clown, I think, for a long time. And I thought for a long time, it's like, oh, I'll just be a bachelor, that old age word from back then that he's just a wacky bachelor. Um, but then, I did finally come out when I was around 21 or two to a couple close friends. But even then, it was, I was gay, but I wasn't a practicing gay.
Hmm.
And that was me for a long time.
When I say the word guilty, what
Yeah.
comes to mind?
Well, the Barbara and Barry song, of course, is the first thing that comes to mind. I'm not sure you're talking about the emotion, but definitely the song, that pure golden, cheesy, wonderful, campy
From
song from
from 1980.
80. Yeah, the
Yeah,
very, yeah.
Barry Gibb produced her album Guilty. I believe it's yeah. Uh,
He wrote it too.
yeah. I think
Yeah,
he
and
co-wrote like most or not the whole album or something and produced
he
it.
did the entire album, and his brothers had a couple co-writes and a producer named Albie Galoufin. I should know it. It's in the book. Who produced like Islands in the Stream in the 70s. Helped a little bit on a few tracks, but it was almost all Barry Gibb's writing and producing that made that ridiculous and amazing record. I love it.
So who's that about?
Uh, a gentleman,
Or scenarios surrounding it.
yeah, it was sort of one of those. It's a gentleman named Ian in the book, and he's based on a real person, and who is a lawyer and a poet. And we were on this date, and we sort of we're just like not connecting on music in a way that was making me happy. And then all of a sudden, Guilty came up, and he was a very big Barbra Streisand fan, which I am not. I'm a bit of a traitor to my people because of that. But Guilty was the one place we could find some common ground. And we had amazing sex. We had amazing conversations. But I was like, oh no, he likes baseball and Barbra Streisand. What are we gonna do? Um, and then Guilty saved us.
Hmm. And did you feel guilty about it?
God, no, no, no. That's where my defiance and stubbornness comes in my taste of music. I'd never feel guilty about what I like or don't like.
Why did you want to tell your story? Why was it important for you to share who you are?
I think,
Especially so publicly.
yeah, I mean, now it's terrifying me. It seemed like a good idea before I got a book deal, but I had always wanted to write a book, but I never knew what about. And these experiences were so extraordinary to me and so surprising to me, not just the sex, but the level of connection and deep sort of friendships and mentorships that evolved out of those relationships. Uh, I really wanted to document it first for myself, and then I wanted to share it because I hadn't seen that kind of story, and I wanted other people to read it and go, "Oh, wow, I can do that." And, "Oh, wow, people in middle age are sexually vibrant, not just active, but like having a great time." And I just sort of thought, why not be honest about these things and give people a different view? And it is scary. It is really, really terrifying, Mark. But it just felt like, well, why not? If I don't do it now, What have I got to hide at this point?
Most challenging aspect or part about telling your story?
Oof. It's hard, like just digging up all that old baggage around being bullied, around all that hysteria around HIV AIDS, the messaging around that and how scary it was and how confusing it was. And, revisiting that stuff was really hard. And it, it, it affected my life at certain times, not terribly, but I was like, why am I in such a foul mood? Why am I so upset this week? And it's like, oh, because I'm writing about age-old trauma that I've experienced. So, um, I'd say that was definitely the hardest part. And then making peace with people reading it is the next hardest part. But it's coming out and people are going to love it or they're going to hate it. But I really hope they love it.
And the best part about telling your story?
There's a freedom for sure. I spent so much time hiding who I was. And even as a pretty, 40 years old adult, so many of us hide a lot of ourselves in our lives when we go to work or when we go into situations. That whole idea of code switching, where we just sort of like turn off a certain part of ourselves. I did that for so long. And now it's just, there's a real freedom of just like, this is it, this is who I am. And there's really, I, as you know, I'm bearing a lot in this book. So there's not much else to hide. And that feels great.
Hmm. So here's my last question for you, and it's simply
Hmm.
this: what do you hope your audiences come away with, your readers come away with after they've read your memoir,
Hmm.
your story, your life story, The Vinyl Diaries?
Yeah. I mean, one of my biggest dreams is that like people read about the artists and my love and exploration of why I love them and are inspired to go listen to some of that music that they may or may not have heard. Um, and I just hope they see something of themselves maybe and just or a better understanding of, their next door neighbor who might be gay or their brother who might be gay. Um, those two things would be really nice results.
You write about saying that if not all, but some of these individuals are maybe amalgamations, or you've changed names.
A couple, yeah.
Why why did you choose to do that?
Uh, a lot of the men, like I'm still very good friends with a lot of the men, and most of them were just like, yeah, just use my name, tell the story. I don't care. Um, some I hadn't been in touch with, so didn't feel good about, you know, using names and or situations that people didn't give me permission. And then some were just hybrids, like because there was there's a character called Martin in the book, and he's definitely a amalgamation of very similar experiences with a certain number of men, um, that all were sort of bringing up the same things around sex and intimacy that I wanted to explore without naming anyone or writing six different stories that all kind of sounded the same. So it was sort of like take little bits of this from there and there from there and pack it into one story.
Were you a clubber at all? Did you go out to dance clubs or anything?
Not really, because that's not my style of music. I really don't love the divas. I don't love a disco mix of a track. And so a lot of the bars and clubs that I went to in the sort of late 80s, when I was first sort of exploring that stuff, really left me dry because the music just was not it for me. So, I think I just missed some of the more radical alternative stuff that was happening in the 2000s in Toronto, especially with Vaseline and these parties that were like really celebrating weirdo queer punk stuff and live music and alternative acts. And, I by then I was sort of playing house with a partner and missed a lot of that stuff. So I do have regret there that I wasn't part of that scene. I think I would have maybe come out and explored my queer identity a little bit earlier if I had seen that.
Did you ever go to like Nuts and Bolts or anything?
I did. Nuts and Bolts, I think, was actually one of the first clubs I went to when I was like 15. Because back then
'Cause
they
it was more like alternative, the music.
that was true. But that wasn't specifically a gay club, was it?
It wasn't. It was mixed.
That's okay. Yeah. So that
Hmm
I did go there. I would go into RPM. There was a
mm
place called Orange Crush near my house, and you're 16, and I looked 13. But
mm.
there was no, they just let you into these places, and that was fine. So I do remember going to Nuts and Bolts and liking the music there. And most of the queer spaces I went into were very sort of diva driven dance mixes. And that wasn't so much my cup of tea.
Well, Pete Crichton, well said, well done, well written. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me, Mark. It's been really fun talking to you. As soon as tickets for the annual Queer Songbook Orchestra Pride Show at Buddy's in Bad Times Theater, the largest and longest running queer theater in the world, went on sale, I bought a pair. Their Pride show the year prior had been one of the best in recent memory, so there was no way I was missing out on this event. Thinking I would have no trouble finding a date for such a special night, I was surprised it actually took me a few tries. Around that time, I had been on a few dates with men closer to my own age who were kind of interesting, so I started off with two of them. Text 1. Anthony, hope all is well. I have a spare ticket to the Queer Songbook show at Buddy's Sunday. Can you come? He could not. Something about his sister. His loss. Text 2. Lawrence, hope you've had a great week. Any chance you can join me at the QSO show I told you about last week? He could not. Something about getting ready for the work week. His loss. Text 3. Nat, buddy. It's the Queer Songbook Pride show on Sunday. Can you join me? Third time lucky, as they say. It seemed only fitting that Nat was going to be my date. He and I had been hooking up for over a year at this point, and we had shared many concerts and records during that time, including the last QSO Pride show, where we were both gobsmacked at the level of talent and queer magic in the room. If I were being honest with myself, I was kind of glad the two older gents turned me down, and I got to take Nat to another night of great music. Sometimes the goddesses do intervene. So much for dating men my own age. Not that I was trying all that hard anymore. Nat was finishing up some final work on his PhD, so didn't have time to join me for beer at my place before the show. Alternatively, we agreed to meet at the Black Eagle and enjoy a pint or two on the patio closer to showtime. At the Eagle, Nat arrived a few minutes late, looking incredible, as per usual. He was wearing a brand new form-fitting Fred Perry shirt with a pair of tight shorts and black Vans. And I wasn't the only one who noticed how good he looked. The men at the Black Eagle sat up as he walked in, and I was delighted to watch their eyes follow him as he walked over to me and gave me a big hug and kiss. This one was mine tonight, boys. Move along. June 17, 2018 was a special night. Not only was it the annual Pride show, but it marked the release of the first QSO album, Anthems and Icons, a collection of 8 songs of special meaning to the queer community. The QSO was founded in 2014 by artistic director Sean Brody and is an ever-evolving ensemble of incredible musicians who have banded together to celebrate queer artists, queer voices, and queer stories. In their own words, they are a professional chamber pop ensemble dedicated to utilizing story and song to express, honor, and elevate 2S LGBTQ+ experience, while providing opportunities for mentorship and other supports to queer, trans, questioning, and allied youth. But to anyone who attends a show, they are so much more. Their performances are unlike anything I've ever seen, and at every one I've attended, it felt like mainlining queer joy directly into my veins. At a QS show, almost every song is accompanied by someone in the community sharing a story about their own lived queer experience. The audience that night was treated to many beautiful tales of queerness, along with songs arranged for a massive band and orchestra. That night, Nat and I both discovered the works of a queer artist from the 70s and 80s named Arthur Russell through a fantastic song, Let's Go Swimming. We were both stunned that we had never heard of him before. Further investigation was required. Thanks, QSO.